Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Larry Gennari from Gennari Aronson, curators of Authors and Innovators, now in our 5th year. Great ideas drive business. The Authors and Innovators Business Ideas Festival is a unique opportunity to take your business knowledge to the next level. Our event is jam-packed with insights, idea exchange, and thoughtful, intelligent conversation. You'll learn from business book authors, innovators, and top business minds as we engage in a discussion on a variety of topics. Take your lunch break with us. Join us for our virtual event each day this week from noon to 1. This year's theme, Changemakers, Reconnecting and Rebuilding in the Post-Pandemic Business World, will focus on how entrepreneurs, especially first-time and first-generation entrepreneurs, can build great businesses for themselves and their communities. I want to thank our sponsors who are so helpful in bringing this together. Needham & Company is our presenting sponsor. They're a globally recognized investment banking and asset management firm focused solely on growth companies and their investors. Founded in 1985, the firm is headquartered in New York with offices in Boston, Chicago, Minneapolis, San Francisco, and in Menlo Park. I also want to thank Launchpad Venture Group, a network of active angel investors building individual portfolios by investing both financial and human capital in New England area startups. The Boston Business Journal, our current and continuing sponsor, and Nantucket Book Partners, independent booksellers, and Authors and Innovators featured innovator from the New Builders, Wendy Hudson. And of course, our host, Babson College and the Arthur M. Blank School for Entrepreneurial Leadership.
I'm Donna Levin, CEO of the Arthur M. Blank School for Entrepreneurial Leaders. At Babson's Arthur M. Blank School for Entrepreneurial Leadership, we teach the entire Babson community to lead change, solve global problems, and create sustainable value across business and society through learning, teaching, research, and engagement in entrepreneurial practice. The Blank School is home to Babson's entrepreneurial centers and institutes where students gather, collaborate, research, and gain real-life experience to augment what they've learned in the classroom. Some examples. Babson's College Fund, where students hone their investment skills and manage a $3 million portion of the Babson College endowment. Women Innovating Now Growth Lab, a venture accelerator that invests in women, enabling them to test, disrupt, innovate, and grow. Rocket Pitch, where students pitch, no matter how complex, a business idea in just 3 minutes with just 3 slides, and receive live feedback from students, faculty, entrepreneurs, investors, and service providers in the audience. Live case studies. Family business leaders bring their real-life challenges to the classroom for live feedback, Q&A, and learning. Make It, where students from Babson, Olin, and Wellesley colleges guide you as you design, prototype, and build projects at the Wiseman Foundry, located right here at Babson College. The Uncommon Table, where we believe social innovation begins with an interesting conversation. At Babson, we believe in long-term relationships and partnering first. If your company is facing a new challenge, looking for ways to develop your team members, seeking talented interns, or ready to mentor the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Babson is ready and prepared to partner, and pleased to be rated #1 for undergraduate entrepreneurship education for over 2 decades. We're happy to be co-hosting the 5th annual Authors and Innovators event, where business ideas are shared, discussed, and amplified. Thank you to our event co-host, sponsors, and all of you who are joining us daily during your lunch break. Now a word from Babson's College President, Dr. Stephen Spinelli.
The world needs entrepreneurial leaders now more than ever. This year, Babson College's Arthur M. Blank School for Entrepreneurial Leadership is proud to partner with Gennari Aronson to host the Author and Innovators Festival, highlighting the importance of entrepreneurship in a post-pandemic world. Lawyers who understand and value the entrepreneurial process are rare, And Babson College is grateful to once again have the expertise of Attorney Gennari and his firm as partners in support of high potential ventures. Over the past 19 months, the world has faced steep challenges and learned many hard lessons. So much has changed. The question now is what happens next? Moving forward in a radically changed economy will require the skill sets of those who thrive in unstructured environments where change is a constant. The traits of entrepreneurial leaders, agility, risk tolerance, resilience, passion, and imagination are what's needed both now and in the future. Entrepreneurial leaders share three defining characteristics that empower them to take action while others are still analyzing the situation, making them different from every other type of leader. They are strong risk managers. They are exceptional uncertainty navigators. They are highly skilled ambiguity explorers. Babson College has been ranked #1 in entrepreneurship consecutively for 25 years. We've always known that entrepreneurship of all kinds should be a force for good in society. At Babson, we believe that the future workforce will be fueled by entrepreneurial leaders. From nonprofits to academia, healthcare to civil service, and startups to Fortune 500 firms, entrepreneurial leaders are depended upon to drive innovation and business success. We practice a partner-first mentality in that we are focused on building a global network of multi-sector organizations and institutions, working together to harness the power of an entrepreneurial mindset to address some of the most pressing challenges in their communities. We are proud to partner with Authors and Innovators in this impactful festival of business ideas. Over the course of the festival, you will hear from entrepreneurial leaders who will challenge us all to think, learn, and act in new ways to drive impact. Babson's own Matt Mottola and Professor Rob Cross are among the authors featured this year. Both are exemplary in their fields and respected as true entrepreneurial leaders and the embodiment of the Babson ethos. Throughout the pandemic, weaknesses have been identified. Strengths are being highlighted. Both successes and failures have accelerated. Babson believes through entrepreneurial leadership, social and economic value are created, which ultimately improves the human condition. We can inspire people to do more, achieve more. We hope you enjoy the Authors and Innovators Business Ideas Festival, and if you're looking for an entrepreneurial academic partner, an organization ready to work together to solve complex challenges facing our society, please reach out.
I'm delighted to be talking to Gorick Ng, author of the Unspoken Rules, Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. I've written about this a bit in the Boston Business Journal. I have actually given this book out to countless people. It is a wonderful read and fits in nicely with what we're talking about today, rethinking for the entrepreneur post-pandemic. This begins with you. Gorick, I'm really pleased that you're here. Gorick is a career advisor at Harvard College, and he's focused on coaching first-generation college students as they manage their careers. He's had a bit of a career himself, and I want to hear about his story. He's managed new employees from his time at BCG. He's also active in the Managing the Future of Work project at HBS, and I know he's worked in investment banking. Gorick, I like to start these off by asking our authors to tell a little bit about themselves, tell their story and how it relates to this story. Tell us a bit about you and what got you interested and motivated to write the Unspoken Rules.
Thanks so much, Larry. It's a pleasure to be with you here today and really appreciate this opportunity. In terms of where the Unspoken Rules came from, I think of it as coming from the head and from the heart. From the heart, I am the proud son of a working class single mother who left school when she was 12 years old. And when I was 14 years old, my mom was laid off from her sewing machine factory job. And it was at that point that I ended up being the person in the family to step up and to get both of us back on our feet. So I ended up spending recesses learning to write resumes and cover letters, afternoons at the public library looking for jobs, and evenings coaching my mom, all through trial and error. And I mention all of this not because I was successful, but because I was unsuccessful. I applied to hundreds of jobs and ended up not getting any callbacks. And it wasn't until a number of years later that I started realizing what we were missing. It started when I started applying to colleges, when I met a mentor who has since become a friend, who applied to some of America's top schools. And from this mentor and friend of mine, I learned that there was a certain style of putting together your application, that it wasn't just a matter of tossing a 5-paragraph essay over the fence. It was a matter of telling your story in a certain way. And it wasn't enough to just simply ask for recommendation letters. You had to hold your teacher's hands through the process.
Very cool.
Those unspoken rules worked, and I ended up getting into Harvard, where I ended up getting a front row seat to so many of my peers going through the job search, only to realize that they had this informal education growing up, this informal education of knowing what to say, who to say it to, in what sequence, at what time. And having that informal education at Harvard helped me appreciate that, wow, there's so much that we just don't know we don't know, especially if you come from a background like mine. This ended up continuing to the workplace, where I ended up noticing that it's not necessarily the smartest people who get up to the top of an organization. It's not necessarily the best ideas that are the ones that get implemented. And so I started realizing, wow, well, what if I could pave a smoother path for people coming after me? And so that's where it came from with respect to the head, with respect to the heart, rather. And when it came to the head, I started realizing that there are 4 million new grads that go from school to work every year. And every single one of them, except those, the privileged few who have parents and mentors coaching them through the process, so many of these 4 million students will end up having to go through the unspoken rules of navigating the school to work transition through trial and error. And so I thought, wow, how inefficient for all of us to be going through this process every year, going through it through trial and error. What if I could deconstruct what you learn in the first 10 years of your career and turn it into a concise toolkit? Can we help people get further, faster in their careers? Can we help companies more effectively onboard and train and ramp up their new hires? And so that all came together in the form of the Unspoken Rules.
Very cool. Where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada.
Ah, in Toronto. Okay. So you certainly learned a bunch of rules just working from home. Just as a young kid working for your mom and learning those kind of rules. So what a great structure you had there as well, but what a tribute to you. So talk about it, because you do in the book, you center the book, and I like this, around a mindset of, hey, you're thinking about a job. You're in a job, how to succeed in a job, which I really liked. And you talk a bit about the 3 C's. Give our listeners and folks who are thinking about this book just a quick primer on the 3 C's. What are they?
Sure thing. The 3 C's are really the North Star of what it takes to be successful as a professional. And the 3 C's stand for competence, commitment, and compatibility. And the idea is the minute you show up as a professional, whether it's at a coffee chat, in a resume, in a cover letter, in an interview, and especially in your first day, week, month, year, in a new project, in a new team, in a new company, the person on the other side, they're sizing you up and they're asking themselves 3 questions. Question 1 is, can you do this job well? Which is the question of, are you competent? Question 2 is, are you excited to be here? Which is the question of, are you committed? And finally, the third question is the question of, do we get along? Which is the question of, are we compatible? So competence, commitment, compatibility, the 3 C's. Your job as an early career professional, and frankly, all of our jobs for the duration of our careers, it's to convince the people around us to answer yes to all 3 questions all the time. You need to convince people that you're competent for them to trust you with more important responsibilities. You need to convince them that you're committed for them to want to invest in your career. And you need to show that you're compatible for others to want to work alongside you and with you. So thinking about the 3 C's is, I found to be a useful way to think about, how am I performing, even if I may not be getting feedback explicitly in the workplace? how do I compare in my 3 Cs compared to those around me? And where might I need to spend some more time if I feel stuck in my career, or if I'm just getting started in my career and want to put forward the best impression, the best foot forward possible.
And it struck me, putting forward the best foot possible is really important. And it struck me as I was reading through this that there seems to be a disconnect between what colleges are teaching and the unspoken rules. So it's wonderful that that student, she did great in organic chemistry and the like, but she's going to have to find that job. And why do you think that is, Gorick? And if you were, we have college professors, we're doing this from Babson, and you wanted to say to them, here's what I want you to teach your students about this disconnect. What would you say to them as they're thinking, goodness, I'm just trying to make sure that I focus on this, the competence piece. They need to know their stuff. But you're saying that's not enough.
That's right. And it's because school is structured such that we're conditioned to just keep up. So to not procrastinate on your next assignment or your next paper, whereas the real world expects us to step up and not just simply keep up. And so I don't blame students for having spent the last 16 plus years of their lives bubbling bubbles and filling in fill in the blanks and expecting that every bit of detail will be clearly spelled out to them, because that's how a course syllabus works. That's how every set of instructions you see at the top of your final exam works. But in the workplace, you have to navigate so much more. You have to navigate hidden expectations from your managers and coworkers. You need to navigate ambiguity, none of which we're really conditioned for in school and in the education system. And so when I think about the gap that remains in the school to work transition, in school, if you're in a technical program, you're going to be focused on technical skills or hard skills. There's increasingly a movement to making sure that students are equipped with soft skills or foundational skills or interpersonal skills, which is important. And that's certainly a big component of the unspoken rules. But where we're missing is these navigational skills of how do you navigate and maneuver around processes and bureaucracy and people and politics. No one teaches that. We all learn it through trial and error or from a good mentor or parent.
And sometimes it's ugly. I know from experience. So let's talk about this, because you do in the book, Gorick. I like that you framed this as kind of, look, let's assume that you've done what you need to get to a BCG or an accounting firm, a law firm, investment banking firm, and the like. Talk about expectations for that person day one, week one, month one. What are the big picture things you would say to them as they're saying, I'm so excited about this job? You would say, remember this about those 3 basic intervals of time as they ramp up.
Absolutely. Well, before your first day, it's important to see the big picture, to understand how your role fits in with your team, how your team fits in with your department, how your department fits in with your organization, and how your organization fits in to the broader context. So to the extent you can, Googling for your employer, reading up on what they've been up to recently, setting Google News alerts, subscribing to their newsletter, listening to the CEO's podcast interviews and media appearances. All of this can help you show up like a high performer, as someone who is already speaking the language right from the get-go. When it comes to that first day, it's all about flexing your competence, your commitment, and your compatibility. And so much of your first day and week is going to be about asking questions, taking notes, meeting people. So sticking out your hand, whether it's virtually or in person, if you're in a hybrid work environment, and saying, hey, I don't think we've met before. I'm Gorick. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to hopefully getting a chance to work with you. And over the course of your first several weeks, you'll be assigned basic tasks that many managers will tell me are tasks that won't lead to a catastrophic failure if you screw it up. And that's all in an effort to test your reliability. Are you showing attention to detail? Are you organized? Are you able to follow instructions and do what you say you will do? After you show that you're reliable, then over the course of your let's say, following 6 months to 12 months to 2 years, that's where you're going from simply showing that you're reliable to showing that you're promotable. And this is the progression of not just going to your manager with open-ended questions like, what do I do next? But instead going to them with options and saying, Larry, I am struggling with this. I suspect that we could take paths A, B, or C. I suspect B. Am I thinking about this the right way?
I love that point. So be a problem solver, not just what do I do. That's one of the most important parts of being a new professional. And I love that you said that in the book. Be enthusiastic, but be a problem solver. I like that a lot. It's really important.
Yeah, so much of it is about managing your manager versus waiting to be managed. And again, this is a big contrast to what we're conditioned to behave like in school.
Right, as students, that's what we do. Gorick, is it any different? Let's say a different scenario. A new team that just got funded. Let's say that maybe your investors like you because you are young and aggressive and the like. Would you give the same kind of advice to a team that is either approaching a strategic partner or an investor? What are the kind of things that you would tell them about the basic unspoken rules? This is not so much about impressing a manager per se, because they're the team. They founded it and they're going to conquer the world. What would you say to those folks about the unspoken rules? They still apply, don't they?
They do, absolutely. It applies, frankly, in all aspects of life. I actually heard from someone that these 3 C's apply just as much to dating, funny enough. That you show up on a first date. It's about your competence, your commitment, and your compatibility.
Right. So true. Let me flip it. So you're the manager bringing in some of these folks. And so we've got a competitive marketplace. What do managers need to know about engaging and managing younger employees who may be thinking differently, who may be taking things in differently, who don't know the unspoken rules? Not so much so from that perspective, not so much about managing folks that they've managed before. What do you tell them?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say to managers who are managing new hires or early career professionals or career and job switchers, it's that so many of these unspoken rules aren't as commonsensical as you may think.
Don't assume. Don't assume. I love that, right?
Right. And so the first step is to make some of these unspoken rules spoken. To really be thoughtful about how you bring someone into an organization. I've had so many interviews with new hires who tell me about the anxiety that they would be encountering and grappling with before they show up on their first day. What can you as a manager provide to this new hire T-minus 2 weeks before they join your organization to help ease some of these nerves and to help set them up for success? Selfishly, I'd like to think that a book like this could be helpful in a context like that, to just set expectations and to level the playing field. When it comes to when an employee finally shows up at your doorstep and is ready to start in your workplace, I found it helpful to have a conversation about, hey, what is it that you want to get out of this experience? So much of whether an individual will be successful, and frankly, this is true for all of life, is success equals luck times drive times skill.
Well put.
And you can, and there's some of these variables that are inside of our control, some of them are outside of our control. When it comes to drive in particular, one way to elevate the drive and the motivation of someone entering your organization is to understand what they're hoping to get out of this experience. So I'd love to see more managers have a frank and open conversation about, hey, what are your broader goals? What do you want to learn? Who do you want to meet? What do you want to be able to show on your resume at the end of this experience? And let's craft an experience that's going to help you help us. I'd love to see that to happen in more organizations as a way of really just structuring an experience that works for the company just as much as it works for the employee.
And I want to state, if I'm a manager, some of those rules that are important. we've talked previously about your good work talking to larger organizations around some of the basics. Look, if a client is on the video with us or on the phone, say something, please. If we're working late or your work is done, it's not the worst thing in the world. In fact, it's a pretty good thing to say, hey, can I help you with anything? You give some of those tips in the book. Can you talk about those and some of the most common blunders for the person who hasn't quite mastered the unspoken rules and might be starting? Give some advice to both the person starting and also the manager of sort of common mistakes, common misperceptions, common blunders.
Sure thing. Well, the first one is the misnomer that doing your job is all that there is to your job.
Well put.
To your point, Larry, when managers say, I expect people to, I value people who go above and beyond, what they're really saying is, I expect you to go above and beyond. And just simply meeting the baseline expectations is falling below expectations. Mm-hmm. It's one of these hidden expectations, unspoken rules, if you will, of the workplace. And so when it comes to some of these blunders that are pervasive, it's waiting to be told what to do versus showing up with ideas and proposals and a point of view on your own. That's a big one. The second is something that we talked about briefly just now, which is showing up to meetings, not just with problems, but with proposals and options and solutions. And finally, this also speaks to something you mentioned earlier, which is unspoken rules around how one is expected to behave in a meeting, where there are three types of meetings in the workplace. Meetings where you're supposed to be seen and heard, seen but not heard, or neither seen nor heard.
So true. So true.
And often, especially for early career hires and those who might be unfamiliar with the corporate work environment, it can often be the case that someone feels like it's not in their place to speak up when it's very well the expectation that they'll speak up. And it's at this point that I think about a framework in my book that I call learner mode versus leader mode. Learner mode is when you're new to a team, an organization, a project, where people expect that you don't know very much. And so as a result, you'll keep your mouth shut, ask questions afterwards, and take notes. If you don't and you maybe impose yourself too hard too soon, people might see you as overbearing or overshooting that zone of competence. However, over time, you'll go through this unspoken graduation to what I call leader mode. This is the point at which in the legal industry, it might be, hey, you did that research. You wrote that legal brief. You know more about this than anybody. Why is it that you're staying so quiet? Why is it that you're even with us today in this meeting? Should we even invite you to the future meeting if you're just going to be there like a piece of furniture?
Right.
And so it's important to know which of these two states you're in and to be in leader mode and to act as a leader when you're in leader mode and to be a learner when others expect you to be in learner mode.
Yeah, it's terrific advice and really, really such an important part of the book. Gorick, I know you feel like I do about, I'll call it a community networking. Talk to someone, a new professional who might be listening to us about the importance of building their own community, which could be their superpower.
Absolutely. When I think of career building, I think of different forms of capital that we're building as time goes on. So when we think of capital, we think of money, which certainly is important. But in the context of career building, it's also about your human capital, your social capital, and your reputational capital.
Right.
Your human capital is what you know and can do. Your social capital is who you know. And your reputational capital is who knows you and what they know you for. And it's important to be building all of these concurrently. It's not just about your human capital. It's not just about putting your head down, doing the work. It's also about folks pulling you into projects. And so when it comes to building relationships, so many of the most interesting assignments aren't going to be publicly advertised. In fact, they might not have even occurred to anybody to be pursued. And so the more people you know and the more people who know you, and hopefully in a positive way, the more opportunities you'll have to be brought into that meeting that you might not otherwise have been purview to or be invited to. So as a new hire, it's essential to, again, stick out that hand and to introduce yourself, to invite yourself to meetings, to follow up with people afterwards, to learn about their work, learn about their motivations. And moreover, ask questions like, how can I be helpful? Is there anything I can do to be helpful? Or even better, if you're trying to come to the table with some ideas, I noticed this. Would it be helpful if I did X? That's what separates someone who just shows up and someone who's that outperformer.
Oh, it's such great advice and so refreshing. Gorick, what are you reading? And in addition to the Unspoken Rules, what are you recommending some of the folks that you mentor also read?
Yeah, so there's the academic side. There's the
we'll take all genres.
Well, on the academic side, a book that I've relied a great deal upon, even as I did my academic research for my book, is The Culture Map by Meyer. And it's a great book that shows just how cultural differences can permeate the workplace and lead to misunderstandings when really they're just a matter of cultural differences. So that's a book that I would encourage folks to check out. Another book in that realm is a book called The Class Ceiling, for those who are interested in upward mobility and first-generation low-income college students and their experiences transitioning to the workplace. That's one that I've looked to as well in my research. And then on the more philosophical side, I cannot recommend highly enough How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen.
Wonderful book. Wonderful book. Well, this has just been terrific work. The book is The Unspoken Rules, Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. I hope folks will pick it up and that they've really enjoyed learning more about the unspoken rules and meeting Gorick Ng. Gorick, any other resources, websites that someone might go to if they want to learn more after reading the book?
I appreciate the offer, Larry. The best way is to stay in touch with me, to go on to my LinkedIn account. My name is Gorick, last name is Ng. Find me there, connect with me there. I'm posting content all the time. And I would encourage folks to also check out the work on my website, which is gorick.com. That's Gorick.com. Love to stay in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gorick. Hopefully you'll get a copy of this book right after you've heard this.
Thank you so much, Larry. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Gorick.
Welcome to Authors and Innovators 2021. I'm Caitlin McCulley, and joining me is Wendy Hudson. She is the owner of Nantucket Book Partners, which is made up of Mitchell's Book Corner and Nantucket Bookworks, both in Nantucket. Also the co-founder of Cisco Brewery. And Wendy, you've been called the queen of pale ales and paperback, which seems pretty accurate to me.
Oh, I like that. I might have to change up my business card.
That's pretty good. So tell us, how did you get into the business of beer and books?
Yeah, I guess I never planned on it, but it's certainly following two very long time passions of mine, I suppose you could say. Certainly I was a reader from a very, very young age. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and frequented the library and the bookstores all the time, every spare minute. And then, beer when I got a little older, that was, always a big part of, college, et cetera. And I had the good luck of moving out to California with a couple college friends after I graduated in 1990. And that was sort of the boom of, microbreweries. And so when I came back to Nantucket for the summer to work, I guess I skipped that, but I was an ethical philosophy major and I was looking for the good life. And I went to work on a family farm on Nantucket and kind of kept coming back in the seasons and this was a little ahead of its time in terms of, sustainability and small farms and things like that. But it was sort of a natural progression to then start making beer as a hobby, and nobody was doing it on Nantucket yet because the East Coast hadn't quite caught up to the West. And so I just was in the right place at the right time and, started that with my husband and had a part-time job at the bookstore in the meantime. So, one thing leads to another.
Yeah, Yeah, that's so interesting. We hear the advice often, follow your passion and the money will follow, but it seems like you were kind of able to do that from the beginning, or is that your perception of that?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
We thought, no way could we do this. We know nothing about business. No way could we start a brewery. We need all kinds of capital. But then, we were around people who were just like, no, you don't. You can do it, this way on the cheap, or you can do things on a handshake. You can, just kind of start very small. Don't, have crazy expectations. We certainly thought we were starting something a lot smaller than Cisco has become in the course of 26 years. We do have a wider reach than maybe we thought, but I think that kind of comes out of its, very humble, kind of organic, kind of self-deprecating vibe that we have. People kind of gravitate toward the authenticity of it all, I think.
Yeah. Well, the Cisco that people know now, you're saying it's totally different from the way it started. If you could tell us how it started, like what did it look like when you first started?
We were literally in the backyard of our friends, Dean and Melissa Long, who had started a winery on the island. I met them because I was working at Bartlett's Farm on Nantucket, and
Okay.
Dean and Melissa were like, you can brew, as I said, you can do it cheap. You can do it in our backyard. We're like, but we need licenses. And they're like, we can get it. They helped us do all that. And we just, kind of were really in a backyard. We called it a Nano Brewery because, it wasn't even micro. It was so tiny. And people would come to the backyard and be like, really? Like, yep. And we would run out of beer because it would take about a month for the next batch to be ready. So we just kind of kept going as we could. And every step along the way, we were always just plowing the money right back into the business for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a long time. I kind of say we're a 25-year-old startup, even now, but we added on, we did combine with the winery, and then we all started a distillery together in 2000. So the same 5 partners, we've always been, it's just the same 5 of us all these years later, which is kind of remarkable in itself.
Yeah. When people come to Cisco on Nantucket, or as you mentioned in the Seaport now, what do you want them to feel? Like, what do you want them to take away from that experience?
Oh, that's a good question. And it's kind of an easy one to answer because we just really want everyone to feel welcome. We definitely love the fact that on Nantucket, it's a very vertically integrated kind of cross-section, our clientele. Especially on Nantucket, I guess we get all ages and a lot of dogs and things like that.
Yeah.
I will say Seaport tends to be younger people. I always feel a little old sometimes, like right after work, because the Seaport is such a hot innovation district. It's wild. It's very, very cool to see from when I grew up in Boston. It was parking lots, but that's another whole story. We've got places now in New Bedford, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a little outpost in Connecticut. So we keep looking for the next cool places, but we just really want people to, enjoy the music, hang out together, super casual, non-pretentious, a lot of humor, I hope, and just have people have a really relaxed time. So
yeah, well, dogs help with that, I feel. You got dogs around. I mean, everybody loves dogs.
Totally.
So when you're thinking about your early days and how this grew over time, I feel like too often now this idea of entrepreneurship it can happen overnight, or, you can raise a lot of money and, be successful very quickly. Do you see that inclination in young entrepreneurs now, or what advice would you give them in that regard?
Well, it's interesting. All the literature, the magazines, everything, it's very much focused on larger scale startups, bigger hits, bigger scalability, et cetera. I did belatedly get my MBA at Babson a couple of years ago, just graduated in 2019. And it was a different sort of focus, I would say. Still entrepreneurial, still smaller, but less patience maybe, or understanding that small business is really a viable, like very small business can be a viable option. And as I mentioned, my quality of life has always been a bigger driver for my husband and me and my partners, maybe than, really wealth building. Nothing wrong with that too, of course, but it was never our focus. And so we always valued our autonomy a great deal. I still do. So we didn't have outside investment. Not saying this is for everybody, but for us, it was definitely the right thing. And so we had the flexibility to be with our children when they were growing up and to just, answer only to ourselves. And that's the same with the bookstore. I love that. My team is wonderful, and we just grant each other a lot of flexibility. And that's more important to me than a lot of other things in a lot of other maybe goals. I guess one message I would say is there's so many ways to measure success, and it doesn't always have to be rapid growth, great valuations or anything. It can be about something a lot more human scale.
Yeah. So we talked about Cisco. You mentioned the bookstores. How has that element of your businesses, how has that evolved over the years?
Well, that's a funny, again, with the media kind of perception people have of independent bookstores is like, oh, poor you, or is it, that must be so impossible, they must be dying, and that's
Right.
just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a real resurgence nationwide. Some, stores closed, people are ready to retire, or they're not quite ready to pivot in the way that they kind of need to. We had such a crazy experience with COVID because we pivoted really rapidly to online. We've had our website for years and years, but our customers found us again and found that they could order anything from us. And I have an incredible marketing partner or director, I should say, Tim Ehrenberg, and he just jumped in with both feet and really blew out our social media. And that's what needed to happen. And it went from, me having to be alone as the owner of the store. This is annoying. In Massachusetts, it's the only state in the country out of 50 that only the owner was allowed in. So my managers couldn't go in.
Wow.
I was on the governor's reopening committee, and I was like, let's change this law, because another point I like to say to people is, if there's regulatory hurdles or something, you can change those things along the way sometimes. So always look for the way to work with your government and change the rules. So far, I haven't been able to do that. Anyway, it was me alone in the store, working so hard. And then it all just escalated to online and then fulfillment. And oh my gosh, we ended up having the best year, pretty much ever for the bookstores in 2020 and 2021. That keeps building because now we're back open, but also we have this other whole, angle to have to, fulfillment. So It's exciting and it makes it feel fresh. And I always love a new challenge. So
yeah. Well, I wonder if during the pandemic, people who maybe had gotten out of the habit of reading decided to pick up a book, and maybe now that habit will stick.
I don't know about that. That's possible, certainly. When I asked people that, I think the habit they maybe got out of was shopping on Amazon, and like instant click. It's like, wait a minute, that realization that small business are so vulnerable and deserve our support.
Yeah.
And that where you spend your money creates the world you want to live in. So it's like, wait a minute, we're going to lose our pizza shop, our like local restaurants, and everybody, that awareness was so front of mind during the pandemic. And, the appreciation for people who are really, essential services workers, everybody, I think we were a little part of that. We benefited. I hope that's true. That, I know with my customers, it is. How wide that spread, I'm not sure, but we really know that we got a lot of people to shop from us that used to just do the one click. So
yeah, so a change in mindset then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how do things look at the bookstores now? Are you back staffing normally, or are you still?
Well, like everyone, we are short-staffed, shorthanded, and we're looking for extra help. We managed in the summer. We had a lot of great, we end up with a lot of college kids and things. But this year, the winter is looking a little quieter. It also, I think there's a new appreciation or understanding with the consumers that that's the case. And the fact that we're closed, at 6 when we used to PM instead of 9 PM that we used to do, they get it. So that's, it's helpful for, saving costs, and also just, as I said, since we're doing so many other things, we're dancing faster in different directions.
Yeah.
It doesn't look quite the way it used to. But since people do know they can shop online, that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's on your nightstand right now? What are you reading right now?
Oh, this is a huge week. This fall is a huge year, or this whole season, I guess, leading up to the holidays. There are so many incredible new releases. So just this week, there's new like Jonathan Franzen, Crossroads, the Anthony Doerr, Cloud Cuckoo Land. And the one that I'm reading for fiction right now is the Amor Towles, The Lincoln Highway, because I was such a fan of The Gentleman in Moscow. And then, certainly I'm trying to dive into all the Authors and Innovators business books. I do a lot of those on audio. So the Machiavelli for Women is the one I'm most excited to sort of whole brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned that if anyone who's watching, if you want to pick up any of the books that we mentioned through this week, you can check out Wendy Hudson's bookstores on Nantucket. The link is on our screen there. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else, any parting advice for entrepreneurs who may be watching?
I guess I would just say, repeat the thing we said before, that follow your passion and, believe that you can do it at any level. And it's the most rewarding way of life I could possibly imagine. So best of luck.
All right, Wendy, thank you again. And for you guys watching, if you want to check out any of the books we mentioned this week, you can check out the link that's on your screen to Nantucket Book Partners. We'll have more interviews with authors and innovators throughout the week, so stay tuned. Thanks for joining.
I'm delighted that you're here and can be with us virtually. Today we're going to talk about the theme of rethinking, our whole theme of renewal and rethinking and the life of the post-pandemic entrepreneur. And I am delighted that one of our first conversations is with Professor Rob Cross. Rob is the Edward A. Madden Professor of Global Leadership here at Babson College. He's a renowned thinker, writer, and a speaker whose category-defying ideas have influenced a broad, diverse of fields. He is the co-founder and research director of Connected Commons, which we're going to hear a little bit about. Most importantly, for our purposes, he is the author of Beyond Collaboration Overload, a terrific book that I have written about in the Boston Business Journal. Welcome, Rob. I'm so pleased you could be with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Larry. It's a real privilege to be here.
Rob, I like to start these conversations with giving our listeners and your future readers a sense of who you are. What is it about this? Where'd you grow up? What is it about this particular field that got you interested, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, great question. So I didn't start thinking I would be into network analysis, but I was coming out of doing my doctoral work and went to work at IBM for a couple of years and was really privileged to be in a think tank there. And at the time when knowledge management was a huge craze, and it kind of still is today, but at that point, 23 years ago, it was a really big deal. And my whole focus was on how do you design technologies in ways that help people absorb ideas from different parts of an organization, right? Cognitively, absorb things. And yet everybody I would talk to, if you ask them, how did you solve a problem, win a client, get a resolution on something, they never mentioned the technology. It was always, I reached out to somebody to get information or to get perspective or, a path forward or whatever it may be. And so it just got me interested from that point around, well, gosh, what if we could map who's interacting with whom and understand the actual flow of collaboration in groups or other elements of kind of how people are working together. And that, sparked back then, and it's held really for 23 years. Work we've done with over, at this point, 300 organizations, run the analytics over 1,000 times, and really been slowly teasing apart kind of different implications of being able to think about collaboration analytically, whether it's at an organizational level or, for the purposes of today, more around understanding what high performers do.
So you've been studying how people learn within a system. And so we could pretty much drop you anywhere. And that's part of what the book is about. Drop you anywhere and help, so you can help people understand how they can perform better, connect better, be their best professional selves. So talk about collaboration overload, the title of this book. What is it, Rob? And how does this happen?
Great question. So for me, collaboration is a good thing. And I really want to emphasize this at the outset, that when we're talking about collaboration overload and reducing it, I'm never talking about just cutting connections out or not collaborating or collaborating less. What you actually see is the more efficient collaborators collaborate more, but they're engaged in a certain way that gives them scale. And that's really the message that I wanted to bring out, was what high performers or more successful people do. But what really got my attention in this is the knee-jerk reaction to everybody when they hear the word collaboration is more is better, right? It's like motherhood, apple pie, all these positive narratives. And yet, if you actually ask, anybody, I'm sure watching this show, if they want another email meeting or phone call in their lives, there wouldn't be any hands that shoot up unless they're the new people, right, in an organization and trying to figure it out.
And we'll get to that.
Right.
The generational shifts of collaboration.
Yeah. And so when I say that, what I'm really focusing on is not just sitting in a team room and collaborating, but really all the ways that connections get at us today, through email meetings, video, instant messaging, Slack, team spaces. Most organizations have distributed around 9 applications that people are working across to collaborate in different ways. And so that means that the collaborative footprint, or the amount of time we spend in collaboration, really over the past decade has gone up very significantly. So we could see that pre-pandemic, about 85% of people's typical work week was in collaboration, yet it's not measured or seen, in organizations. And so helping people think about how they get better at that and find ways to make that time more efficient was really kind of the heart of the book and kind of where it came from.
So we collaborate in lots of ways through different media and mediums. And so, Rob, how is it, I get the sense from your book that this could happen anytime, but how has it changed in the pandemic when so many of us are working from home, and therefore the collaboration is more virtual, more laborious. Right. You've got to answer more emails. Right. You've got to be on more, my goodness, on these video platforms, you have to figure out whether you're Zoom, WebEx, Google. So has it gotten worse because you're talking to people all the time?
Right. So in what we can see analytically, and there's different studies, not just work in the consortium, that show this, but in general, people were working about 5 to 8 hours more a week, and the collaborations are drifting earlier into the morning and deeper into the evening as we move through the pandemic. And so it's not just also the amount of time that's increased, but I love the point you're making about more meetings. And what we've seen in general is people are trying to jam shorter meetings into the day to get what they need to get done in this kind of post-pandemic world, even as we move into hybrid. So just mathematically, right? If you had 8 one-hour meetings in a given day, now we're getting to 16.
What could possibly go wrong?
Alone, right. That alone has an impact, right? It means that you're in those shorter intervals. You've got to be even more intense. Right? There's no downtime really because you're high intensity point to point. You're switching across content areas very quickly in different ways. And you end the day not with 8 meetings with to-do lists, but 16. And so just that alone is driving up work in pretty predictable ways that we're seeing throughout the consortium and the different members there.
And you're also finding that the collaboration expectations have changed. I want to talk about Scott in a minute, meaning you send an email, regardless of now the time of day, you expect an answer and fast. Right. So talk about Scott, the poor protagonist in your book, high performer, a leader in his organization. Right. Talk a little bit, I don't want to give this away too much, but talk a little bit about what happened to Scott and the kind of things that he had to do to turn this around.
Yeah, so he was a really fantastic story because when I run these analytics, and we can be looking at groups of 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50, 60,000, if we're looking at large-scale mergers or things like that, people see these overloaded people in networks, and the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, they're a control freak, right? They're hoarding, they're not letting information flow. And I would say only in a small set of cases is that true. I find that, what's been really fascinating to me is people get themselves into collaborative overload for different internal triggers that we have. And so for Scott, it was this deep desire to help. He saw leadership as helping others. And that's a great thing, right? Right up until you become the path of least resistance for too many people and you can't keep up, right? At some point with the scale of it. And so, with Scott, what he really focused on is understanding, how do we shift demands in this system. So real easy thing everybody can do, work for him too, is you look back 4 months in your calendar, and what you're looking for is not the big thing, because the big things that are killing us, like the one big project or the one demanding client, those oftentimes are too critical to us to delegate in different ways. And if we do delegate, we just pick our most trusted people, the same people we turned to the last 3 times. What you're looking for, where are the routine things that have crept around me? The routine information requests that I just keep answering because it feels quick in the moment. The routine decisions that I just keep showing up for because I think I need to be there, but we could change thresholds or make somebody else a go-to person on it. And then portions of your role. And what we find is that if you look for the smaller things and then you don't look for your most trusted person, right? Not the same people that you've turned to in the past, but you look 2 or 3 layers out in the network. that what you're suddenly doing is shifting demands off the overwhelmed around things they won't fight you for. They won't reinsert themselves, over time. And you're building talent, right? You're cultivating capability and pulling other people into the collaborations. So that's one tactical, thing that he did, but I really can't emphasize enough the importance of also understanding our own triggers that lead us to jump in.
Talk about that, because there's room for plenty of different styles of leadership within an organization.
Right.
And so whether it's Scott or Joan, as the person you're hiring, how do you say to them, watch out for overload, watch out for these triggers? What are some of those triggers, and how do people recognize them and course correct?
Great question. So, for Scott, again, it was just this deep desire to help. Like, he would pop into email threads and do other things that half the time he only had half the solution. So he ended up in situations where he was creating work for his team, and they were coming back to him in different ways, weeks, if not months later. And it was totally from a good place. It wasn't controlling. He was just saying, look, I'm here. That was what he was really showing when he jumped in with an idea. And it caused invisible overwhelm in ways that sometimes didn't even happen to him 6, 12 weeks later, and he couldn't even put it together, that he was the one that started it a lot of times. And so for others, what we see is it's desire for status. They just continue to insert themselves in ways that keep them recognized for things they were good at 5 years ago, even though it's not the thing that's going to distinguish them, in the coming. For others, it's accomplishment, right? For me, that's me, right? I find if I see a 5-minute window, I'm going to try to jam 60 minutes of stuff in it, and I'm going to ignore the 2 to 3 hours of email and collaboration I have to do to get alignment on this thing, and then wonder, why am I working late, right, at night? And again, it's me jumping in, seeing this thing that I convince myself. And then, of course, one of my favorite sets of interviews were the people that described fear, right? And either fear of what colleagues think, right, lead you to jump in when you shouldn't, or FOMO, fear of missing out. My favorite sets of interviews were people that were describing the life-changing benefits of turning FOMO into JOMO, right, the joy of missing out, and kind of that
I love
slight
it.
shift.
JOMO.
So those triggers are huge.
So, Rob, you talk to a lot of companies. Are those triggers, are there any sets of industries where those triggers are worse? So, for example, somebody who needs to be involved at all levels of product. Copy me on everything. I may or may not respond. Accounting firms, law firms, investment banking firms, where the product is less tangible, but my goodness, I've got to make sure I know what's going on with that important client or clients or company. Are you seeing any difference in collaboration overload, collaboration patterns for companies that is it more internal for product companies, external for service companies? Are you seeing any of those kind of dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some industry trends, and there's certainly some demographic trends.
Talk about those. Yeah, because you do a little bit in the book.
Yeah, as well. And, as one example, like when you look in hospital settings, it's the desire to help, right, that's killing people. And again, it's a great thing, right? And it's not saying you don't jump in to help, but what people need to learn to do is not help directly, but help by, connecting people around them, help them build capability to solve their own problems, and that's not an easy thing. A lot of times the insidious thing about collaborative overload is it feels good right up until it doesn't. You feel like you're in the thick of things. People are responding off of you. And so, it's insidious, right? Up until that point where overwhelm hits. But what we found from a demographic standpoint in this, we've been had the benefit of being able to look at gender, for example, for many, many, many years now. And you can see that women systematically absorb more of the collaborative demands than men in a system. And there's a couple of different reasons for that we can see. But what it means is it's really important for women in particular to be thinking about, how do I streamline connectivity, right? How do I become more efficient so that I can then invest in ways that create scale, or that can convert into a 10, 15% anchor right on time as you go.
How do you as an organization, so if you're a board or you're a venture investor that's just put some money into a team, how do you identify folks like Scott? And how do you, as a board, as an organization, as an outside investor, all of those folks have stakes in the careers and the success of people like Scott, who might be overloaded. For the board members, for the venture investors, for those folks who want to help that Scott, what would you tell them to do other than to go to Connected Commons and learn a bit? What else would you tell them in terms of this is what you need to do to be identifying somebody like Scott, and here are the things to think about? What are the right questions that they should be asking? How can they get some help?
Yeah. So, first of all, the analytics are evolving so that places can see this very quickly. There are products like Microsoft's Workplace Analytics that is actively looking at patterns of email, calendaring data, LinkedIn, IM, and not in a way that's opening the emails, right? It's not kind of down to a level of creepiness.
It's not creepy.
Like that. But
okay.
it can be, evidence of, okay, here's the people that were potentially overwhelming. And the reason I think that's worth doing is nobody's really paying attention to this. The consulting firms come in and a lot of the investors demand the same thing. They're saying, well, we need layers out of the hierarchy. We need faster, decision cycles. We need greater responsiveness, greater efficiency.
Right.
And all these things that have presumed to create more agile organizations by taking layers out have just imploded collaboration on different people, right? And it's going to create the same inefficiencies that happen in the decision hierarchy, but just in an invisible way, right? And it's not just that you are not accomplishing what you want, but the risks of attrition, particularly as we go into 2022, are huge, with people projecting massive turnover rates. And what I'm seeing in this is it's the people that are like a Scott that are most overwhelmed in these networks, that this break called COVID has helped them see a different way to live their lives. And so if you look at the people that are most likely to leave, a lot of times the ones that are projected are the most connected in the network. So you're losing not just what that person knows, but the way they kind of help hold the group together. So, for me and what we built in the Commons, are very specific and very rapid analytic ways to go in and see kind of how these groups are operating and what you can do. Even if you don't, then I would be thinking about particularly looking at your manager level in most places. Those are the ones that are always getting crushed, absorbing 20, 25,
right.
30% of the collaborative demands in the place. And if you can sneak through to the executive ranks, it gets better, right? So you have more help, you have less people coming down on you. You see statistically in there, it's really the manager and the first level leader that you can really go in and say, here's some very targeted ways to improve efficiency, to focus on the way you're structuring your work, ways you're using these different technologies. There are really specific tactical things that these people use to get back about 18 to 24% of their collaborative time there.
I thought that was really powerful in the book. So some of those specifics to pick up on that thread, you've written about this before. So you'd say to that busy CEO, you would say to her, look, there are some things that you can do, and you've written about this not just in the book, but certainly in a number of the many articles you've written for Harvard Business Review. Block out time to think about your own personal rhythms, time block email, and use, quote, standard meetings for problem solving, that kind of thing. Can you, just in a nutshell, tell people what you mean by personal rhythms and time blocking?
Yeah. So what we see in this is that just blocking 2 hours in a calendar for reflective work is almost a linear association with productivity. And what it's doing, if you choose to block the 2 hours, or, as I went through all these interviews, I would really hear people saying, well, I may do that, but then other people would say, I prefer actually to do my creative work early, and then I block email in 30-minute intervals 3 times throughout the day. I tell people what I'm doing, and life adapts around me, right? I'm kind of putting structure into how things are getting done. And what it does for you is subtle but really important. So what the cognitive psychologists show is that just the act of looking down at a text and back up, that disruption is oftentimes a 64-second recovery.
Wow. You mentioned that, and that was just amazing. So true.
Yeah. And then you don't experience it, right? We kind of know we're getting back up to speed, but if you let your attention completely go and you lose what they call the schema or your thought process, then that can be up to 20, 23 minutes to fully get back on track. So you start adding up all these disruptions that happen. Let's say you have 60 kind of Slack, IM, quick losses through the day, and maybe 2 big ones. It's an hour, 40 minutes, right, that you're talking about, that, you don't experience it, but it's real time that gets lost, that these people, by segmenting work, it never works perfectly, right? You're always adapting as you go, but they're getting more efficiencies in by virtue of doing things like the blocking time and a whole suite of other ideas there.
And you've got some great checklists in the book. What are you doing with your 2-hour blocks? What are you reading these days, Rob? What are you thinking about?
Great question. So for me right now, the book we just signed is around, this book is around high performers, right? Understanding kind of what the people that get and stay in the upwardly mobile category are doing. The next one we just signed, and we mentioned some of this work in Chapter 8, is around the people and how they build and maintain connections today that are just happier. And I mean that kind of, tongue in cheek.
Happy people.
Psychological well-being and resilience and thriving. And you find that what I call the 10 percenters, the people that seem to be living more on their term, because everybody I talk to is successful, right? I'm going to top organizations out there and I'm saying, give me 5 of your most successful women, 5 of your most successful men, and interviewing them. They're all conventionally successful, right? But you could see that 10% of them just live differently in ways that are living by their terms and less by the systems at the heart of it. So I've been focused a heck of a lot on understanding ways that relationships affect health, how we grow inside and outside of work through our lives, how we get a sense of purpose and meaning. And then perhaps the biggest thing has been understanding how stress comes at us today through all these relational touch points. And again, it's a really big deal. We're used to thinking about stress as the workload or a nasty client, but a different form of it happens when we get hit with 20, 25, 30 touch points through the day where you sense misalignment with a colleague, or you get a text from a child where you can't tell if it's they're in trouble or it's just a 5-minute thing for them. And we go through the days today, get hit with 20, 25, 30, you just get through each one because it's what we do as humans, but you end exhausted and we can't quite put our finger, on what's happened. And so I've become acutely aware of, all the work that's going on about both the negative impacts of that and then how people lean into connections in ways that kind of shield from that in my reading. So not a specific book, but a whole, set of bodies of literature we've been looking into.
I love that part of the book, and the fact that this book, a core business book about performance, really brings it back to what we're talking about here today at Authors Innovators. Post-pandemic, the entrepreneurial framework, the entrepreneurial mindset, it begins with you, the entrepreneur. This isn't something that going to an different organization is magically going to fix. It is about you. Rob, where else, what other places can people look to, other podcasts, other things that you're doing to learn more about this?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. So there's a lot of different kind of recordings that we're doing, in terms of the book launch. But probably the easiest thing, I think, and is just to go to my website, and it's robcross.org. What I did, the book was put on the Next Big Idea Club's list. And as a product of that, they asked me to...
Congratulations. Great list. Great company.
Thank you. But what they asked me to do is do podcasts on 5 of the biggest ideas. And so I went ahead and took it a step further and just created videos that kind of summarize the ideas in the book. And they're on my website, and you can kind of go through them sequentially. And then it gives you a chance to know what it's about and make a decision if you want to know more or not, right? And you can kind of dig into to the rest of the site. So I think in terms of that, that's a great thing. And then from a corporate perspective, I would urge people to look at the Connected Commons. I mean, that's grown to, with the support of Babson in so many ways, it's grown to about 110, 115 fantastic organizations.
Wow.
And I cannot emphasize enough how much this work and the subsequent work is a product of these very organic collaborations with so many companies that I just could not be happier to be kind of in a place like a Babson that values those kind of relationships and creating stuff that's having the impact it is. So
wonderful.
Definitely check that out too.
Wonderful. Rob, thank you for doing what you do for our viewers. The book is Beyond Collaboration Overload. Rob Cross, take a look at this book, take a look at his website, and I know you're going to take away lots of terrific learnings, not just about business and strategy, but most importantly, about yourself. Rob, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.